Good morning, everyone. We've got a full meeting today, so we want to get going with things. We only have one bill today, but today is Tuesday, February 27th, 2024, and the Education Instruction Committee will now come to order. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Representatives Baines, Sapicki, Chisholm, Cochran, Darby, Dixie, Glenn, Hakeem, Hicks of Washington, Johnson of Knox, Leatherwood, McCalman, Reagan, Todd, White, Vice Chairman Raper, Chair Lady Moody. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I am Deborah Moody, the chair of the Full Education Instruction Committee, and we welcome you. And after we have the one bill, and I hope you'll stay tuned. We have a great lineup, a panel that's going to talk to us about mental health. And I hope, we never know who's going to be here in the following years, but hopefully this will set a precedent for whoever is here next to keep the conversation going as things change. And but anyway, we're going to take care of today. So, Mr. Vice Chair, will you open us with prayer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. May we bow in prayer. Almighty Heavenly God, thank you so much for just blessing us in so many ways. I know we don't deserve it, and you just continue to forgive and bless us anyway. Lord, we thank you for Madam Chair's leadership and her discernment and her wisdom, and we just appreciate that so much. We ask you to bless each person in this room. We ask you to bless this committee, and they act in accordance with your will. We thank you for your son, Jesus, and we ask it all in his name. Amen.
And now, members and anyone in the audience, if you'll join us in saying the pledge. All right, thank you. Members, does anyone on the committee have any recognitions, or is that Representative Dixie? You're recognized, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I would like to wish the greatest sorority day on the Hill, the Delta Sigma Thetas. Thank you for coming to our committee, and hopefully you have a great day and have some great meetings and help teach us some things. So thank you for being here, ladies.
Thank you for spending your morning with us. Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A little bit off topic, members. In 1992, I had the opportunity to play baseball for the Nashville Sounds here in Nashville. And I hear that the rumblings of Major League Baseball potentially coming to Nashville to complete the professional part of our sports in Nashville. So looking forward to hearing that coming to fruition and bringing a professional MLB baseball team here to Nashville. So just keep our fingers crossed, everybody.
Go Cardinals. Chairman Raper, Vice Chair Raper.
And may I add to that, I think that the good nickname would be the Musicians, the Nashville Musicians. And one more point is this to Representative Johnson, go Vols.
Anyone else? All right, we are ready to take up our... Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yes, sir, Dixie.
I just wanted to add to Representative from Murray County about the baseball team. I think the team, the name they're looking at is the Nashville Stars, which is named after one of the Black Baseball League teams that was here in Nashville way back in the day.
Yeah, that makes good sense. That's good. The instruction committee says aye. If you're listening. Okay. All right. The bill we have up today is House Bill 2687 by Chairman Doggett. You have a motion and a second.
Good morning, everyone. Chair Lady, first time in front of you.
Yes.
Longtime listener, big fan. So, no.
You must have another bill up somewhere. Proceed, please.
Well, thank you. House Bill 2687 deals with sextortion. Aaron's Law was originally passed by the General Assembly. It was carried by a member of this prestigious committee back in 2014, named after Aaron Marin, a survivor of horrific child sexual abuse. Aaron's Law has been passed in 38 states thus far. It encourages schools to provide age-appropriate instruction material to students on safety and how to report sexual abuse, which may occur in the child's home or other environments. And this is applicable to grades K through 12. This bill is intended to add the topics of sextortion, sexting, and internet crimes against children to the Aaron's Law curriculum. And Lady Chair, I do have someone here to testify. If you would like to hear them, then we could continue, or I'm at your will.
Members, since he has some guests here to protect their time, let's go out of session and let the guests come forward. Excuse me. Yes, will you please come forward and be sure your microphones are on, the red light comes on, and introduce yourselves, please. Thank you for being here.
My name is Joe Laramie.
I'm Stephen Warner,
And remind us who you're with.
Children's Advocacy Centers of Tennessee.
I am here to assist with Stephen for the Children's Advocacy Centers of Tennessee. I am on the board of directors for the National Children's Alliance, which is the overarching organization which covers the Children's Advocacy of Tennessee.
Thank you both for being here. So we're anxious to hear from you.
Chair Lady Moody and members of the Education Instruction Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 2687, an amendment to Aaron's Law. My name is Joe Laramie. I live in Franklin, Tennessee, but I'm a retired police lieutenant who served with the Glendale, Missouri Police Department for more than 30 years. I spent the last 9 years of my career as the commander of the Missouri Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, known as ICAC. I later worked as an administrator with the Missouri Attorney General's office, where I was responsible for online crimes against children and human trafficking, and just recently retired from the National Criminal Justice Training Center, where I led online exploitation prevention for the National ICAC Task Force program and provided resources and trainings across this country in Canada and Australia. I've been teaching internet safety for more than 20 years, and I'm not an alarmist about kids' use of technology. But I am very concerned about the recent surge of financial sextortion and the number of children who saw no way out. Sextortion is when someone obtains nude or explicit images or videos and threatens to share that content with others unless the victim complies with a demand. For sexually based sextortion, the demand is for more images or actual contact. And the typical victim is a teen girl aged 10 to 17. For financial-based extortion, it's about paying the offender with money or gift cards. And the typical offender is a teen boy aged 14 to 17. In the spring of 2022, the FBI, Homeland Security, and the ICACs began to see an increase in reports of financial sextortion. For 2022, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received 7,000 sextortion-related cyber tip line reports. And for 2023, just through November, that number jumped to 20,000 reports. And overall, there have been at least 20 teen suicides. Most of the offenders are in Nigeria or the Ivory Coast. And I was at a global forum on sextortion last summer, and a woman from Nigeria said, "In my country, this is a legitimate job. We're not going to arrest our way out of it, and awareness and prevention is absolutely the key to protecting our youth." Here's how financial sextortion cases happen. Well-trained and organized crime groups identify victims who are susceptible to sextortion scams. Most are really good kids, good students, good athletes, well-liked, or children of prominent people. kids with the most to lose. The offender impersonates a teen female and targets boys of various platforms such as Snapchat, Instagram, and others. And then they ask the victim to move to multiple sites where they will screen capture the victim's friends list on each of those sites. The process moves quickly. It can be 2 to 6 hours, and most often happens at night behind a closed bedroom door. The offender is sexually aggressive, sends stolen explicit material to the victim, then says, "I've sent you mine, now send me yours, and be sure to include your face in the picture." Once the victim sends that content, the offender immediately threatens to release their family, to release it to their family and friends, and shows the captured friends list as more intimidation. If the victim does send money, it's never enough. They'll want more. And if the money is sent, it's sent through a cash app like Venmo or PayPal to a US-based money mule who'll forward it internationally. Even if the victim begs, threatens suicide, they don't care. They've said, "Go ahead, your life's over anyway." I want to pay my respects to some families who have lost a child to this horrific crime. Ryan Last, age 17, from California, whose mother, Pauline Stewart, has become a friend and an awareness advocate. Evan McDaniel, age 14, from Texas, whose mother's TV interview is included in my presentations where she says she told her son not to send naked pictures, but regrets every single day not telling him what to do if he did. And finally, Gavin Guffey, age 17, from South Carolina, whose father, Brandon Guffey, sits in a chair like yours in the South Carolina State Legislature. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you very much. Members, would y'all like to go on and hear from Mr. Warner? And then we'll do questions? Okay, let's
Sure
do
things.
that.
On behalf of the Child Advocacy Centers, I'm excited to be here. We brought this bill at the request of the Department of Children's Services. They have identified in Tennessee as this is one of the fastest growing crimes that is coming across the child abuse hotline. And so it is not just a national pandemic, international pandemic. It is an issue here in Tennessee, and our kids are dealing with it in every county. It is relevant to note that the criminals target kids with the most to lose. They are social engineering. They're finding children of prominent figures. They're finding athletes. They're looking for kids who have a lot to give up. And then they're targeting them in ways that are uncommon. One of the things that stands out is this is targeted primarily, particularly on the financial side, at 14 to 17-year-old boys. This is not typically a population that is the victims of abuse. Normally, abuse, particularly in boys, happens earlier in their life. So it is different than a lot of other crimes. Also, we don't have a perpetrator to prosecute. Very rarely does this perpetrator live in Tennessee. So if we can pass, we already have fantastic laws on the books around prosecuting those who committed this crime locally. Our perpetrators live overseas. The only way we can really deal with this crime is to educate the kids about what appropriate actions online are. Parents unknowingly hand their children gateways to the world. When they hand a 10-year-old a smartphone with no limits on it, the world has access to that child. So I know that there are lots of bills around internet safety that are coming out this year. We are fully in support of all of those. This addresses a particular concern that we cannot address significantly in other fashions. We ask for a positive vote out of committee today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your tireless work. Members, I saw Representative Hakeem first, but if you'd like to, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll get you on the list. All right, Representative Hakeem.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. And gentlemen, thank you. To say the least, this is something that we need to take serious and move in an expeditious manner. I wanted to ask, how long does it take? Well, I think you gave me 6 hours, potentially, for something like this to happen. The implementation, assuming we move forward with this legislation, the implementation, how long before we could make this an active vehicle?
So we've had the Aaron's Law bill on the books for 10 years. And so there are already systems in place to deliver that education K through 12. This bill also strengthens our reporting requirements and the recommendations to the Department of Education regarding curriculums. So we already have a system in place to roll this out. The Joint Task Force on Child Abuse and Neglect rolled out Aaron's Law 10 years ago. It is a statutorily mandated task force of over 50 folks that are subject matter experts across all domains. So courts, education, I serve on that along with a number of my CAC directors. It is broad. Our intent is that we will be making recommendations to Department of Education by the summer about curriculums that fulfill this component. There are several curriculums that we already use that are have elements of this, and we'll continue to do a deep dive into better recommendations. I would say by this fall, we will be able to have at least recommendations to the schools regarding curriculums that fulfill this component.
Yes, Representative Hakeem.
Thank you very much. I know what you said about 10 years, but do we consider this a start, or are we, does this take us down the road, this legislation?
To add the topics, this crime did not exist in 2014 functionally. As Mr. Laramie said, it really has popped up in the last 2 years. This gets us in front of the kids. And the fact that we go all the way down to kindergarten, the truth of the matter is TBI says that most kids are exposed to sexually explicit images before they're 9 years old. So we've got to get to kids young and talk to them about what's appropriate. And it is developmentally appropriate. We fall within the full structure of family life curriculum. And so the prohibited concepts are there, the opt-in for parents. And so all of those pieces we're operating within those guardrails, but we can get this information as developmentally appropriate to the kids as young as kindergarten. So they begin to know that the iPhone that parents give them to play on YouTube for Kids isn't truly safe. And parents, most of this education probably needs to go to parents as well as the kids. The internet is not a safe place, has never been a safe place, but it is particularly problematic for children.
Just one last question.
Yes, you may go ahead.
Okay, I heard what you say about parents. Now, is there presently a mechanism where parents can, I don't know if the term should be exposed to what needs to be done, or do we assume they're going to automatically, do the right thing?
Across the country, and of course here in Tennessee, the ICAC task force programs are doing a lot of presentations to parents. What'll typically happen is the school will ask them to come and talk to parents at the school. But what I can also tell you from personal experience, the attendance is fairly limited.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And thank you for being here. I think I just have one question. So in the case that some child becomes a victim of this, do you have mental health as part of the process even after it's been identified? And the reason I ask is because I watch a lot of TV when I'm not here. And I was watching this show about this very thing. And the child, after she told her mom and they tried to get out of it and all this, the child still suffered from a lot of mental health issues after the fact that she told her mom. The FBI got involved and all that. So is there some sort of mechanism for a child after they become a victim of this particular crime?
So short answer, there's nothing comprehensive. Longer answer, our child advocacy centers, if the child is referred to a CAC, the majority of our CACs, child advocacy centers, have mental health services available to the child at no cost to the child or family. That is not comprehensive. We wish it was. There's not funding streams by which to pay for that. School-based counselors need to know about this and know how to deal with it. I know the General Assembly has appropriated significant funds and continues to invest in school counselors. Our CACs have highly trained, trauma-informed therapists in most of our communities that can deliver that. There's not a comprehensive umbrella for therapy.
And I do believe also that law enforcement is becoming aware, but is still a little bit behind the times on how do they respond to victims and victims' families, and do need to be brought into the mix of education and awareness as well.
Representative Glenn.
I'm sorry, I said I had one question. So are you saying that there need to be more funding to combat this problem or to begin the process of ensuring that our kids are taken care of long after.
I'll defer
I
that
mean,
to
go in,
Department-
ask for the money and quit playing.
I'll defer that to the Department of Mental Health, who actually is tasked with this response. But it is a challenge for our CACs that there is no statewide grant funding for mental health at this point. Our CACs do it because it's the right thing to do, and it is the best response to the child who's been hurt. There is a need for more mental health services for kids who've been abused. Absolutely.
Thank you, members. We have 2 people wanting to ask questions, but may I remind you of our great panel that's here to come in. And since you guys are local, so to speak, we may be calling you to come back again.
Please.
It's very important. Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Madam Chairlady. Gentlemen, you mentioned the source of this as being Nigeria. Are you aware of any efforts on behalf of our federal government to counter this with diplomacy or other activities?
Yes, I can say that the federal law enforcement agencies, the FBI and Homeland Security investigations have taken this as a joint project, and FBI is handling the Nigeria cases, and Homeland Security investigations are handling those in Côte d'Ivoire, Côte d'Ivoire, which is the Ivory Coast. And there have been a less than helpful response from the government in the Ivory Coast, but there has been a response and much more helpful response from Nigeria.
Follow-up.
Yes, Chairman Reagan.
Are you aware of any countermeasures, as in Trojan horses or malware that's being sent to the perpetrators of these to wreck their systems?
I am not.
Might I suggest that you pursue that? Thank you.
And Representative Dixie.
Thank you. Well, I'm the father. I have 2 teenage daughters. And if you have any children, anybody here that has them, you preach to them all the time. Don't do this. Don't do this. Once you put something out there, it's out there forever. You can never erase it. So my question, you alluded to in your story that the mother said she talked to her son, but she wished she had told him what to deal with afterwards. Are there any type of programs that help educate the parents on how to talk to their kids about this?
The ICAC task forces, which are all across the state and the country, do have and have been putting out, and that was part of my personal responsibilities, was to lead those efforts across the United States for the task forces. And as a matter of fact, I brought with me, if anybody would like me to share these, I'm happy to email these to you. But this is, I'm a victim of sextortion. What can I do? One side, it says, here's what you can do. And the other side, it says, here's where you can get help. We have online sextortion. I didn't think this was going to happen to me, which explains the situation. We have, this is sextortion, and explains how this happens. And so these from the ICAC task force, from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children as well, are all available in free resources to be shared across the schools, to parents, to any community groups, to anyone who would like to have them.
If possible, could you email it to the chair and then maybe she can distribute it to us?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll get that out to you, members. Representative Leatherwood, excuse me.
Thank you. Do you think these criminals would be able to carry out these crimes without these various social media sites being out there?
Social media sites do facilitate the actions. I can say that there was a special meeting that was held in Nigeria with Meta, which is Facebook, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. As a matter of fact, they were required to stay in their hotel under security guards because of the fear of ramifications for their actions while they were in Nigeria.
Yes, Representative Leatherwood.
Then as a follow-up, if these social media platforms were financially liable for these crimes, I would think that would add up to a very hefty amount of money. And so my question is, do you think these social platforms, if they were financially liable, could clean it up by filtering with their logarithms and everything? Certain pictures just don't allow them to be transferred. Certain verbiage just don't allow it to be transferred. So to me, it seems like having them financially liable for the harm and the crimes and the deaths that's resulting because of them. As you say, it couldn't be facilitated without them. I would think they could stop it. What do you think?
Well, I can tell you that Section 230 of the federal code on dealing with the internet is prohibiting just that from happening, creating a financial liability for what is posted on their networks. I can also tell you that on January 31st, there was a major hearing in the Senate Judiciary in the United States Capitol for this topic as well. And it has been incorporated into a number of different bills, a review of what liability would be for social media companies. And it's just, it's a complicated process that I would be in agreement to changing Section 230, but I can't say that it will be changed anytime soon.
One last one.
Yes.
Given what's in federal code, is there anything the states could do? Is there any wiggle room? Yeah, I haven't read it. Is there any wiggle room for the states to be a little independent and create some liability for these businesses that are allowing and promoting this?
I'm not a lawyer, and I don't want to pretend that I know the total answer to that question, but I don't believe that the state can create a law that covers something that is permitted under federal law.
Thank you.
All right, members, we're at the end of our questions. I know there's probably still lots in our heads, and but we cannot thank you enough for your work on this. And I hope that we can have you back and continue this, and let's come up with some great ways to protect our children in Tennessee. But thank you for being here today.
Thank you, and thank you all.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I'm going to gavel us back in session. Chairman Doggett, you got a, oh, pardon me, I'm being pointed out something. We have some questions for you now
Okay.
from Chairman Sapicki.
First of all, this is going on right now in our country, all over the place. And these internet companies can stop this. They can do it. Now, I know you're one of the chairmen of criminal justice. Are you going to go further with this on your side in criminal justice and try to take more avenues on how to go after the people that are doing this? Are you going to try to do that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Chairman Doggett.
Thank you. If we can find a mechanism or a way to do that, absolutely, I would entertain that. One of the biggest challenges that we have is that these individuals are of course overseas. And so the various things we've attempted to do in the past with the phone calls or the harassing calls that have been done, a lot of those, the spam calls are coming from overseas, those crimes that people will sometimes tell you that you've got a child that's incarcerated and you'll need to get a green dot card from a Walgreens and send it these numbers, and these perpetrators are all overseas. So if we can find a way or a mechanism to do that, I certainly will. I will say this, I read recently that some of the major cell phone manufacturers have, I think somewhere in their software updates, have included now recognition of nude photos. And so I think when you set up a phone, that if you put in that it's a child or a minor, that it takes that into consideration. So the dissemination of photographs or videos from the phone itself through text message, it prevents that from sharing. What I would like to see is our social media companies incorporate some of that same technology that they use to prevent the sharing through Messenger or other types of platforms, because that's where a lot of these crimes are occurring, as testified. It's coming through social media.
Yes, Chairman Sabicki?
Maybe our two committees, criminal justice and education, can work together, and maybe we can bring these social media platforms here to Tennessee and have them explain to us in detail about how this is happening, when we know that through this little phone right here, they can track wherever I go, who I talk to, et cetera, to reverse engineer this and go after these individuals that are attacking our children. That might be something interesting to have in Tennessee, to bring those social media people before us and let them answer to the people of Tennessee. So thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Bain.
And just to say that these tech companies are paying zero in taxes for this data that they're taking. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions for our sponsor, I'll entertain a motion. All right, the question's been called. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. You go on to calendar and rules, and thank you for bringing this bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
All right, members, that concludes our business. And now we're going to get into some other good things here. First up, we thought we would bring up Mandy Spears with the Sycamore Institute. So if you will come up and join us at the table. Thank you for being here. And please introduce, if you don't mind, for the record, restating your name and who you're with, both of you. Thank you for being here today.
Good morning. Brian Stracely, the Executive Director for the Sycamore Institute.
Mandy Spears, the Deputy Director of the Sycamore Institute.
Thank you so much for being here. And we are understanding you have some slides and a report. And as was mentioned with our other guests, if you don't mind, emailing your handouts, we'll disseminate it to our members. But thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. So we were asked specifically to come talk about adverse childhood experiences, and so that's going to be the focus of our presentation today. First, I want to do a quick refresher on Sycamore Institute, who we are and what we do. And then we'll kind of introduce two core concepts for this conversation, which is adverse childhood experiences and toxic stress. And then we'll look at some data on the prevalence of ACEs in Tennessee, as well as their impact. And then finally close with some information on steps that are available to prevent ACEs or mitigate their effects. So Sycamore, the Sycamore Institute is an independent, nonpartisan public policy research center for Tennessee. We have a staff and board that come from across the political spectrum. And so what we try to do is equip folks like yourselves, policymakers, advocates, journalists, other civic leaders across the state with impartial and data-driven resources to identify, understand, and solve challenges. And our aim with that is to help you all more effectively engage with and address barriers to good health and economic security in our communities across the state. The general approach we take to do this relies on kind of three pillars. Number one is we just try to be accurate in everything that we do. Did we get it right? And not only technically right, but did we give you the full context and paint the whole picture, including all the nuance and limitations of what we know and are able to say. As I said, we're committed to being impartial, so we don't lobby or advocate, we don't take positions. We just try to present the world as it is as best as humanly possible. And finally, we want to make sure that the work we do is accessible so that no matter your level of expertise or political perspective, it's understandable and everybody can take it and run with it. We do work on a wide range of issues: health, public finance, education, economic mobility, et cetera. And it's been a few years now, but one of the topics that we have worked on in the past is adverse childhood experiences. So to ease us into that conversation, we're going to start with an illustration. So this is a cinder block tied to a rope or a cable. And you can see that the weight of that cinder block is putting stress on the rope. Now, as all of our parents probably told us at some point or another, facing stress and adversity is a normal and even essential part of growing up. Our brains are developing throughout childhood, adolescence, and into early adulthood. And this is a time when we learn coping skills, problem solving, and how to be more flexible and resilient in times of stress and adversity. Now, sometimes experiences can push us to our limits, right? That stress might be severe, but it's still tolerable so long it's something that we're capable of dealing with, right? It's maybe not too long in duration. We've got folks who can help us overcome and adapt. But too much stress for too long can be unhealthy. Another way to look at this, we're going to be showing not real numbers. Stress on the y-axis, time on the x-axis. So positive stressors, things that are kind of temporary. So maybe you've got a big exam in school. It's the first day of school. You've got nerves. Maybe there's a big championship game with the team that you're playing on that night. And then there's sort of higher stress things that are still more tolerable. Maybe longer lasting difficulties like the loss of a loved one. Maybe community underwent a natural disaster. Some sort of frightening injury at the game that you were playing in. But if that stress activation is kind of time limited and buffered by relationships with adults who can help you adapt and overcome, your brain and other organs can recover from that stress and from what might otherwise be damaging effects. And then there's a concept called toxic stress, where this really comes from a prolonged activation of the body's stress response. And that can create challenges for a person's functioning. It increases, obviously, your heart rate, blood pressure, elevated levels of stress hormones in the body, like cortisol. And this pushes you into sort of a prolonged fight, flight, survival mode sort of situation. So things that might cause these kind of toxic levels of stress, generally called adverse childhood experiences. So there's a couple decades of research that has found that certain early experiences, particularly in the absence of nurturing relationships with adults, that can disrupt the healthy development of a child's brain in ways that change how they respond to stress, both as children and throughout their lives, and that also can impact their health throughout their life. The original ACEs study was done about 25 years ago. It had 17,000 patients who underwent a physical exam and then confidential survey. So it's scientifically robust and a statistically significant study of the impact of childhood trauma on long-term outcomes. And what that survey asked about was 3 different types of experiences that really fall into 3 categories. There's abuse, neglect of different types, and then household dysfunction of various types. And after asking about that, they also analyzed participants' disease rates. So including what might seem like the obvious conditions like addiction, depression, obesity, but also conditions like cardiovascular disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, things like that. And what they found was the more that someone had experienced one of these 10 things on the screen as children, the more disease burden they had as an adult, including and up to and including even premature death. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but first, I'll show you how common some of these experiences are for folks in Tennessee. So this is from a survey of parents who were asked about their children's experiences, and it shows the most common responses for Tennesseans age 0 to 17 in 2022. So you can see about a quarter of children whose parents said that there was divorce or separation of the parents, about 10% having substance use or mental health issues in the house, 9% a parent and guardian who was incarcerated, and then also witnessing domestic violence, losing a parent or guardian, and then being a victim of or witness to violence in the neighborhood. So from that survey, this is sort of showing just very broadly how many kids in our state approximately had 0, 1, or 2 or more of those adverse childhood experiences. From a different survey of adults, this was asking about things that you experienced before you turned 18. And again, the most common responses here You see verbal abuse, divorce, drinking, physical abuse, mental health, domestic violence, sexual assault, a parent or guardian being incarcerated. So a lot of those same things. So for our purposes this morning, what do these experiences mean? And what is the kind of physiology behind how they cause stress that can lead to long-term challenges like school success, workplace success, and so forth. So again, when any of us are in a stressful situation, the body activates this typical stress response where you have your rush of adrenaline, your heart rate goes up, stress hormones come out. And when we're in that sort of frame of mind, our decision-making tends to bypass the more thinking, rational part of our brains and really rely on that fight or flight freeze mechanism. And normally when a child's in this situation, and the situation has passed, especially if there's a loving adult who is able to help them, that response winds down and the brain settles back into the more normal pattern. But when you're under constant stress that you don't have sort of the tools to deal with, that stress response stays activated and it can set you on a kind of a permanently high alert. So that constant activation can overload your systems and lead to kind of long-term wear and tear on the brain and the immune system. Sort of like if you're revving a car engine for days or weeks at a time, you're going to do a lot of wear and tear on that engine. And what this does over time is it changes the way that our brains develop. Our brains are built from the bottom up over time. The basic architecture, you've got sort of neural connections that start to be built before birth and into adulthood. And those connections shape everything from our basic skills like language recognition to kind of higher order functioning and decision making. And really importantly, the connections that you make early on sort of set the foundation for everything that comes later. So the stronger your foundations are in terms of neural connections early in your life, the stronger foundation you have. And what these do is really set you up so that your emotional and physical health, your social skills, your kind of cognitive linguistic capacities, they emerge in the early years and are important for success in school and throughout your life. Toxic stress reduces those neural connections in important areas of the brain at a time when children are supposed to be growing more of those connections. And so it can subject you to kind of having underdeveloped neural connections in some of those really critical parts of the brain as a child. So this kind of constant stress response and its effects on the brain specifically, it can lower your tolerance for stress and maybe lead in school to maybe more fighting, checking out of lessons, defiance. It can make it harder to sit still and pay attention. It can reduce your ability to problem solve and figure things out. It can make it more difficult for you to make friendships and maintain relationships. It can increase problems with learning and memory. Again, those elevated stress hormones can affect your body's immune system and its growth and development. And then you can have sort of elevated levels of inflammation that can lead to things like heart disease and other health problems. So very broadly, this is just sort of what it looks like throughout someone's life. You have the adverse childhood experience, which disrupts your neurodevelopment, and that can cause social, emotional, cognitive impairment that might cause you trouble in school and maybe lead to the adoption of risky behaviors like smoking, drinking, drugs, teen pregnancy, violence, even. Can also increase your disease, disability, and social problems. So lung cancer, addiction, maybe dropping out of school, and then unemployment and issues in the workplace. And that disease and dysfunction can, as I said, even lead to premature death. And so these are years that are lost as a parent, as a teacher, an employer, a caregiver, and a taxpayer. So how might we see this manifesting? This is a recent survey of children's mental health in Tennessee, and you found that almost 1 in 10 kids age 6 to 17 in the state report depression, 14% saying they have anxiety. And we've seen a big jump in particular for high schoolers in the last few years who are saying that they're experiencing symptoms of depression. It was already high at around 30%, but going up quite a bit since about 2017. And you can see this isn't just a Tennessee thing. I mean, the trend in Tennessee mirrors that we're seeing across the country. So a few years ago, Sycamore did an analysis to try to better understand the long-term impact of adverse childhood experiences on health and prosperity in our state. Now, these data are a little bit old now, but I suspect they haven't changed a lot. And one example that we looked at was the relationship between ACEs and depression. And what we found was that for Tennesseans who reported no ACEs as children, so these are adults now reporting no ACEs when they were children, 13% reported that they had depression. But for folks who had 4 or more ACEs, it was 44% experiencing depression. Similarly, with ACEs and smoking, the fewer ACEs you had, the less likely you are to smoke, and vice versa. And obviously, we know that smoking is one of the deadliest and most costly kind of health behaviors that you can engage in. It's worth noting that of the 95 counties in our state, there's only one that has a smoking rate that's lower than the national rate. So as part of this analysis we looked at several conditions and behaviors and asked how much of each of these can we attribute to these early experiences of toxic stress. So when we did that, we found that having at least one ACE accounted for about 49% of depression in Tennessee. That's even after controlling for other known risk factors for depression and these other conditions that we're about to go through. So we estimated that it accounted for about 32% of the state's adult smoking rate, 24% of asthma, 21% of COPD. So obviously not great for our health, but we also wanted to look at the economic cost of that, specifically medical costs, but then also sort of lost productivity from employees who are sick or not showing up to work, that sort of thing. When we did that, this is what we found across 8 behaviors and conditions, and it adds up to an annual impact of about $5 billion in 2017. Again, that's just medical costs and lost productivity that we estimate are attributable to ACEs from these particular 8 conditions. So what that tells us really is that if you can prevent or mitigate adverse childhood experiences when people are young, that's an opportunity to get better outcomes across the board for all of us. And that can translate not just to better health, better behavior, better learning in school, but better economic outcomes for the state. Now, if you spend any time reading up on ACEs, you'll probably encounter this phrase, fact, not fate. And what it means is that ACEs are something that happen to you, but they don't set your destiny. There are ways to prevent them or mitigate their effects. So in childhood, obviously, we've kind of talked about, we have environments and experiences that can generate positive or negative outcomes for us. And when those negative experiences outweigh the positive, you are more likely to see more negative outcomes. So what can we do about this? Well, one option is to pile on some more positive experiences, those hearts on the seesaw right there. For example, maybe setting kids up with nurturing relationships with teachers, right? But this fulcrum here in the middle, this represents the child's resilience, how they handle and process these experiences and how it affects their brain architecture. And it's possible to shift that fulcrum because, as we said, a child's communities and experiences can shape their resilience in either positive or negative ways. So there's also this concept called positive childhood experiences. And these PCEs can buffer the negative effects of ACEs that children have experienced and help improve their resilience. The state's Department of Health has begun gathering in the last few years data on how Tennesseans experience these positive childhood experiences. And they asked specifically about 7 things. One of them being, were you able to talk with your family about your feelings when you were a child? Do you feel like your family stood by you in hard times? Did you enjoy participating in community events? Did you feel like you belonged in high school? Did you feel supported by your friends? Were there at least 2 non-parent adults who took a genuine interest in you? And did you feel safe and protected by an adult in your own house? And so when they have done these surveys, they found, kind of like the surveys that we looked at ACEs, adults with fewer positive childhood experiences are more likely to have depression. So you've got about 50% of folks who said that they had either 0 up to 2 of these positive childhood experiences that ran through in the last slide, experiencing depression, versus 20% for folks who were able to answer yes to all of those questions. And likewise, with just generally how people rate their health, the fewer positive childhood experiences, the more likely people were to report that they had poor physical health at least 14 days out of the past month. So how does this translate to your work, schools and public policy? And what steps might we take to kind of shift that fulcrum and create more opportunities for kids to experience connection, stability, safety, and meaningful relationships that help them become more resilient as both kids and adults? So first, there are kind of 2-gen approaches where you try to assess and meet the needs of both the child and parent at the same time. For example, sort of providing parenting education and mental health screening that might enhance the likelihood that caregivers are offering a supportive environment to their children. Another example of a 2-gen approach is evidence-based home visiting, where a trained nurse or social worker might provide support and education to parents in the home, and then could potentially connect them with appropriate services as needed, and help them, again, provide that safe, nurturing environment. School and community safety, obviously, steps that you can take to make sure, that kids are learning and living in an environment sort of as free as possible from violence and bullying, things like that. School-based supports like mental health counseling, schools being one of the most accessible places to meet a child's needs. There's trauma-informed approaches where you kind of train teachers and educators to be aware of these challenges that kids might be facing, and knowing sort of what to do and how to differentiate between behaviors that might be driven by some of these experiences versus just your sort of more general acting out. Mentorship programs that can provide those healthy, nurturing adult relationships that maybe a kid isn't getting elsewhere. And then, high quality early learning that, really for infants and toddlers, setting up, for long-term success where they feel like they are in a safe environment and that they're being taken care of and, set up well for that brain development and that foundation. So you've got folks in state government who are far greater experts on this than we are. The Commission on Children and Youth and the Department of Health have a lot of materials and information that they could share with you, and they have a sort of partnership called the Resilient Tennessee Collaborative, Building Strong Brains. So I highly recommend you look there. And then outside of Tennessee, Harvard has a Center on the Developing Child that has a lot of good resources. The CDC does as well. So that is the end of our presentation, and we would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that and the slides. Wait a minute. Now, Representative Glenn, we saw you first.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and thank you all for being here. I think as I listen to you brief, I think we can all say that getting to the root problem of what's happening with our kids can help them along the way, as well as you said, help the state financially. Is to get into the root problem, is that due to the lack of health insurance that so many families are without, and they can't get the kids the services they need at a younger age? Is that due to lack of health insurance around the state?
I think it would be hard to pinpoint one cause. When you're looking at these experiences ranging from divorce, mental health, substance abuse, so that certainly could be one of them, but I would not be able to say to what extent it is greater than the others.
Yes, Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And that is so true, because you have to take one step at a time, right? No one solution answers it all. But if the reason why folks are not getting treated is be due to the lack of health insurance across the state, then that's something we need to look at. How do we make sure that folks have the necessary health insurance for kids to get treated along the way? You mentioned mentorship as well, advocating for more mentorship. I am part of the Big Brother, Big Sister program in Montgomery County, and I can tell you that, mentorship is so important. But at the end of the day, when that child goes back home, they go right back into that same environment. You take them away for a few hours a week, but they go right back into it. And so how do we, again, I think that goes back to helping the parents with some sort of mental health along the way. So I really like the mentorship piece, but I think we do have to really look at the root problems of what's happening with that. So thank you for that.
Thank you. We have two more folks on our list. And just to keep in mind, we do still have mental health to come up, and they can help fill in or, with what you have presented and all, but, excuse me. Members that are on the list, Representative Hakeem and Representative Johnson, are you all right if we bring up mental health now and Department of Ed? Okay, we'll go. That's fine. Representative Hakeem.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson and guests. Thank you so very much. Two questions. One is that was there a wide differentiation between urban and rural, public and private schools? That's one question. Second question is the economics within the home. Was that a great factor, dealing with healthy foods and things of that nature?
So there are, if you just look, they call it the ACE score, often the number of adverse childhood experiences that a person has. There's not a lot of variation in ACE score across different types of regions. I don't know about school settings. The types of ACEs, of course, are very different depending on the setting. For example, obviously in the current context, we're continue to be in the midst of an opioid crisis. And so you see things like more children being raised by their grandparents in rural areas, parents with addiction issues, mental health issues. At the same time, there's a lot of research that has followed the original ACEs study that has tried to explore some other things that impact children in the same way. And some of those things are things like community violence or living in concentrated poverty or being food insecure, not knowing where, the next thing is going to come from. So there's a lot of, it's a complex problem. And I think we're still kind of learning about how it varies. And it's really hard to ask these questions and get good information because obviously there's a lot of stigma associated with answering questions about, especially if you're asking the parent about what's going on in the home, and then the stigma associated even later as an adult with answering those questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, guests.
Thank you. All right, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I was at NCSL, and there's a state, I think it was Colorado, that had a very high suicide rate among youth. And they passed legislation that allowed any kid K through 12 to request mental health care. They could go to a screening tool online and go through that screening tool with their parent. And they were automatically given 6 appointments with a therapist in their area. And Colorado had a very high suicide rate, and after 3 years, 62 out of the 64 counties had utilized this service, and for the first time in Colorado history, they saw their youth suicide rate drop. So kids could go in, get screened, automatically get 6 meetings, and then be screened to see if they needed more. Do you think that's something that might address some of these issues as well? for Tennessee kids?
I'll defer to the department on that, but will take this opportunity to say we focused on ACEs for today's presentation, but we are actually in the midst of a bigger research project on children's mental health in Tennessee. We published a report recently on trends that are showing some alarming trends in suicide rates among teens, particularly teen boys. The forthcoming report that we have is really just a scan of all the resources that are available in Tennessee for these types of things, including lots of investments in recent years and efforts to expand school-based behavioral health liaisons, for example, school-based care, being able to built-in care for services that are provided in schools. So there is a lot going on in the state right now. I think the department's probably better prepared to talk about how those things are actually working on the ground.
Okay, and thank you. And I just, you talked about the suicide increase. That's Tennessee just moved into the top 10 in teen youth suicide as well. So it's concerning. Thank you.
Chairman Sapicki.
So do you have any correlating data on the stress of what ACEs are in regards to the destruction of the family unit, where men are not sticking with their families, the divorce rate is out of control, women are having babies out of wedlock, and we're destroying the structural unit of the family? I'm sure you would agree that that is leading to ACEs issues in our children. What about music genres that sexualize women and treat them like trash, like a commodity, right? And the self-respect of women is being degraded every day by typically certain music genres. Those would be causing ACEs. And then we just passed a bill here talking about sextortion and the ability of having sexual images on young children's minds, and the proliferation of the promiscuity of our society, of women putting their bodies out there for sale to get gratification and acceptance by society. Would all of those be also contributing factors to our escalation of mental health issues and ACEs in our children?
I think that's certainly possible.
Possible?
The 10 things that original ACEs study asked about, I don't think anyone would say, well, these are the only things that cause toxic stress, right? When it comes to trying to, quantify and track, folks who are doing surveys have to ask about specific things. I think the most important takeaway from this probably is that any sort of experience like that is causing this prolonged stress response activation can be damaging to a child's brain development and their long-term life outcomes, whether that is divorce, substance abuse in the house, or one of the experiences maybe that you're discussing.
Yes, Chairman Sapicki.
And just to follow up for clarification, because you used the word probably, being the Sycamore Institute, you're giving us a presentation on these are the factual things that you found. I would hope that you would agree with us that when a child goes through a divorce of a family, it's traumatic to that child. When a young girl is sexualized by social media, that's traumatic to them, right? So I would hope you would agree with that statement that those are contributing factors to the escalation and rise of ACEs in our society.
Yeah, so the probably was more about the music, which is just not something I've seen research on, and so that may exist. Obviously, I mean, in the data we showed, divorce being the number one most common response among those things that were asked about, I think reflects that, yeah, that's a very frequent, cause of these kind of experiences.
Yes, Chairman.
So the music genres that trivialize and sexualize women, and these young women are being exposed to this, and they're trying to emulate that type of genre, would that possibly cause adverse childhood experiences for those young women?
Again, that's not something that we've seen research on. It may exist. So I don't want to kind of speak out of turn there. And I'll just say that if it is causing this sort of prolonged stress response with, in a situation where the child is not able to sort of deal with it, overcome with it, have folks who are providing that sort of nurturing relationship to help them through that, then it's certainly good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sycamore Institute. We appreciate all your work and research. We're glad you're close by. There's probably a lot more, and the more research you gather, we'll probably be calling you back. But thank you for all your research and help today. All right, Commissioner. So we have the Commissioner of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, Marie Williams. We are so happy you are here, able to join us today. And we have the Department of Ed, Jack Powers and team. So- There he is. If y'all, again, make sure your microphones are on and introduce yourself and remind us who you were with for the record. And members, what our intent was is after hearing the presentation from Sycamore Institute, is that these two departments can fill in some more information of what's being done and the possibilities too. So take it away. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Good morning, Chair Lady Moody and also Vice Chair Raper. We're so grateful to be here with you all and the distinguished members of this committee. Very sobering testimony that has occurred before us. And again, grateful to speak to all the things that are happening that the Sycamore Institute is now doing a research paper on that you'll be hearing more about. To the right of me is our Deputy Commissioner of Community Behavioral Health Programs, Matt Yancey. And then to the left of me is our colleague from the Department of Education. And we're so glad to have her here with us. She's Assistant Commissioner Paisley. So very glad to have you. Very also grateful for the work that Sycamore Institute's doing as it does really promote and support the things that we'll talk to you about today. If you look at our first slide, we wanted to remind you about our vision and mission as a Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. One is to create collaborative pathways to resiliency, recovery, and independence for all Tennesseans that struggle with mental illness and substance use disorders. When you look at our vision, you'll see a state of resiliency and recovery in which Tennesseans living with mental illness and substance use issues can thrive. Going to the next slide, we strongly support these values in all that we do: customer-focused, integrity, inspired purpose, excellence, compassionate and effective leadership, solutions and outcomes-oriented, all that we do there, and then partnerships. Going to the next slide. Here's what is really concerning when you look at the gaps. Yesterday during our budget hearing in the House Finance Committee, we talked about this. So our focus today and what you guys asked us about are kids. When you look at 2021 data, children and youth ages 9 to 17, as you heard earlier, we have a lot of kids struggling, 95,870, struggling with serious emotional disturbance. One thing that's very important for this committee to remember, we are but one small piece of this puzzle of helping address these issues. 95% of the kids in this state, according to the Sycamore Institute, have insurance coverage. 95%. Either TennCare, which is referenced here, you'll note that of that percentage, about 38% have TennCare, Medicare, VA through their family. And then you've got a higher number that actually have private insurance. That's 53% that their parents or someone that's taking care of them has that insurance. Our department is focused and funded, thanks to you all, for those that are uninsured. So when you look at that number, you'll note that about 5,350 kids in this state that have serious emotional disturbance are uninsured. You all passed legislation a couple of years back and allowed us to put together the Behavioral Health Safety Net, which our community partners fund to provide the full array of services. So after the guy left from the Child Advocacy Center, I actually went outside and spoke with him, the executive director, to say, if you got an uninsured kid, please send them to the mental health center. It's totally free and it is comprehensive. It's all the way from assessment to intervention to therapy, both individual and group, medication assistance if needed, transportation, the whole gambit. And last year, our incredible providers actually served 1,317 of those kids. And we do have the money to serve the full amount if they come forward. So I want to make sure that y'all are clear. There are services out there, and it's important that we know that, because you all are part of that solution. The next area, you'll see the substance use disorder, 61,480 kids that are struggling with substance use disorder. You'll look that the number of uninsured there is lower, 3,430. And we've been offering programs through group housing and also working with TennCare, who is a large provider of services for kids with high ACEs, as we heard about earlier. Under persistent sadness or hopelessness, they talked about that in the Sycamore Institute review. Females right now are having a higher incidence of feeling sadness or hopeless. And then males are having still an increase, but less than what we're seeing with females. For kids that are considering suicide seriously, you'll note that we have a continued pre-pandemic trend where we do have higher notes of suicide being considered, both among males and females. Here's what's really interesting. The latest Vanderbilt poll that's come out about the top overall concerns with parents that are looking at educational concerns with their kids. Number 2 is bullying and cyberbullying. Number 3, child mental health and suicide. Then when they asked about top education concerns, number 2, 1 percentage point behind learning, was my child's social and emotional well-being. Think about that for a minute. 38% say that their kids are concerned about their safety at school. If you'll go to the next slide, what I do want to say to you is another latest research that has come out. We are so proud of this because we have done, because of your funding, a lot in partnership with TennCare and DOE that will be speaking. We now just had a huge study come out, look at all factors in a comprehensive way that ranks Tennessee number 1 in youth mental health care. Number 1. And I want you to remember that because you added the money for the uninsured kids, I think that's what got us where we're at. I really, really do. And you'll note that that focused on access to, and also the ability to have cost-effective mental health care. Again, y'all's dollars made a difference. You can tell that. Going to the next slide. I've asked Deputy Commissioner Yancey if he would speak to this. You guys had questions about this area. So Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning. I believe this is an issue she asked me to speak to because I talk about it quite a bit, both on a personal basis and a professional basis. My wife and I are proud parents of a soon-to-be 13-year-old daughter who, and like probably many parents of children of the similar age, she has lobbied for years now for a cell phone, and we have said no. And if I have my druthers about it for the next 2-3 years, I will continue to say no, because it leads to what we all know is social media use. The second reason I think I've been asked to talk about it is because this is a question we are asked about quite routinely in various settings. What is the impact on children's mental health, on youth mental health as it relates to social media? There's one source that we always point people to that we're going to talk about this morning. We've called out the most salient pieces from the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory that was released last May on social media and its impact on youth mental health. So we'll get into some of the data points here. As most of you know, when the Surgeon General issues an advisory, is of significant importance. They don't just look at any public health issues. They really look at the ones that are having the biggest impact on our country. And I think the data here on the screen bears that out. As you can see, according to the Surgeon General's report, 95%, just about every 13 to 17-year-old that you encounter is using social media. is pervasive. Most concerning, a third of them, 33%, say they use social media almost constantly. And that is not just relevant to 13 to 17-year-olds. You can see 8 to 12-year-olds reported 40% of that age group use social media, even though the age restriction is technically 13. So you can see this research really, and this data shows that it's being used pervasively. The Surgeon General's report does reference some potential benefits of social media use, things like feeling accepted, feeling supported, easier time showing personality and creativity. But I think this report shows that there's ample evidence that the negatives may outweigh the positives. You can see here some of the potential concerns the report speaks to: disruption of healthy living, sleep, physical inactivity, time spent on devices, concerning content, which we heard about this morning, as well as open to negative interactions. Moving on to the next slide, social media effects. So the Surgeon General's report referenced a large study that did a systematic review on social media and determined that adolescent social media use is a predictive of a decrease in life satisfaction for girls ages 11 to 13 and boys ages 14 to 15. And that when you have a young person using social media 3+ hours a day, it doubles the risk of poor mental health outcomes. And why does this all matter? I think our partners at the Sycamore Institute spoke to the critical time period related to brain development that adolescents are going through. They are very susceptible to peer pressure, peer influence, and social media often is the gateway for those influences. Next slide. Another study that the Surgeon General's report referenced was a large representative survey of 13 to 17-year-olds where researchers noted several impacts of social media. As you can see here, that research points to mixed results. 46% of young people said that social media makes them feel worse. 14%, a smaller percentage, says it makes them feel better. But again, as a parent to a young teenage girl, 6 in 10 girls say that they've been contacted by a stranger on social media, 60%, in ways that make them feel uncomfortable. And then a third of girls, 11 to 15, say that they feel addicted to social media. There's this term that I'm coming to learn, influencers. So there's influencers who are using social media as a way to influence really impressionable young people. And the research points to those influencers and what they're talking about having an impact on body image, on low self-esteem, higher depressive symptoms, eating disorders. The commissioner referenced some data earlier in the presentation related to the uptick in suicidal ideation among young girls. Suicide rates among young girls is having a significant impact upon that population. Next slide. Just some key takeaways again from this U.S. Surgeon General's advisory. You can see it leaves some things that parents should consider. I won't run through those, but most pertinently, things for policymakers. It includes things like strengthening protections and developing age-appropriate safety standards. It encourages policymakers to require higher standards of data security for children, also to limit access and minimize risk of harm to children. I think we can all attest that youth mental health has reached a crisis in our country. And I think many people, including the U.S. Surgeon General's report, would point to social media as one of the primary drivers of that. So, Commissioner, I think I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. We got 9 minutes left, so we're going to get through this really, really quickly for y'all so that you'll see what we've done investing, because we talked a lot about the problem. Well, what are we doing to help solve it? The first thing that you guys will see is that the Lee administration and you have made immense and life-changing investments in mental health for kids across the state. In our own department, $52.7 million you dedicated to that. What has that done? You've got $11 million in school-based behavioral health liaisons, $7.8 for the behavioral health safety net for kids that we spoke about, $6.5 million with the Tennessee Resiliency Project, investing in crisis services. So grateful for the ability to have, by the end of this fiscal year, hopefully 3 kids crisis centers across this state. where kids can go when they're in a crisis, and then investing in prevention and mental health promotion programs. Looking at the detail around the school-based behavioral health liaisons, if you'll go to the next slide, Matthew, please take a look at this. 3 million in 21, 4 million 23, 8 million 24. So right now, God bless you. Right now, we've got 23 million total for this, and that allows us to have 274 liaisons across the state. What does that lead to? Reduced discipline rates, reduced truancy, increased academic success, increased graduation rates. And if you want to see what those dollars have done, take a look at the numbers of kids that have been touched, 23,490 in this last year. Pretty amazing. Going to the next slide, this is, to me, speaks more volume than any of us could ever say. It's a mother and her child who actually went through this program in Knoxville. We'll take 2 minutes for you to listen to that. Thank you.
The U.S. Surgeon General has declared the decline in youth mental health a national emergency. Now, Knox County Schools is trying to curb the crisis with a partnership helping thousands of students. And one mom tells me it saved her daughter's life.
It went from having a stomach ache when it was time to go to school to full out panic attacks when we had to leave the house.
Sarah Owens didn't know how to help her 12-year-old daughter, Abby, after the pandemic hit.
She would sob all day at school, which in turn led to bullying because she's the kid in class that cries all the time. She refused to eat in public. She refused to use the restroom in public.
Sarah was pulling her out of class several times a week and spending hundreds of dollars on therapy that wasn't working. Abby missed more than a month of school, failing nearly every class as her symptoms spiraled out of control.
After so many doctor's visits, I'm like, there's physically nothing wrong with her.
In the middle of it all, Abby's family moved to Knoxville, where she started a new school. That's when an observant guidance counselor picked up on her behavior. Abby was put on a referral list to meet with a mental health liaison through a partnership between Knox County Schools and the Helen Ross McNabb Center. Master's level mental health counselors give students extra support, covering all middle and high schools and offering services at 15 elementary schools. The program has served nearly 2,600 students since it launched in 2018.
This is just really a way to access treatment more efficiently and for us to be able to respond and assist the school system.
I saw an immediate change in her after 3 counseling sessions with the counselor. It was like a light bulb went off.
Abby was able to meet with her liaison after hours and continued sessions via telehealth through summer break. Now she's a straight A student.
It's such a relief to know that your child has a safe space where they can go and talk about these things, and you can address them. You can fix them at that point. So it's just a completely different kid, and we just wouldn't be here today without them.
There you go. Speaks volumes. From Memphis to Mountain City, 23,000 kids last year had these same experiences, and it's because of the money that you guys put in the budget. Matt's going to go over a couple more programs so we can get through this, and then have our DOE colleague say whatever she needs to say, and we'll be open for questions.
So just briefly, Project Basic is another school-based program that we have offered historically. It's focusing on K through third grade students, really working with those teachers who are dealing with challenging behaviors in their classroom. We've seen a lot of success on this program. Next slide is related to youth mental health promotion and suicide prevention. So it's not all about treatment. It's not all about intervention. It's about increasing awareness. It's about ways to identify risk factors for suicide. Have historically partnered with agencies like the Jason Foundation, Centerstone, Mental Health America of the Mid-South, Mental Health Association of East Tennessee. They're all doing great work on behalf of the state on educating young people around mental health issues. Next slide is related to the K through 12 Mental Health Trust Fund. I know of no other state in the country that set aside $250 million to help invest in children's mental health services. This year, we have been provided $6 million of those dollars of the interest that the trust fund has earned to expand services. We recently released an announcement of funding to help build out infrastructure for school-based mental health programming across the state. Next slide is on the Tennessee Resiliency Project. A lot of detail here, but this was a $6.5 million appropriation that you all invested in FY22 to help us expand our school-based efforts, to help expand early childhood mental health work, and also to expand our crisis services across the state. You can see here on the table the detail among the grantees and the programs that they're offering. The next slide is the Behavioral Health Safety Net. The Commissioner referenced this earlier. Really proud to live in a state where if you're a child and have a mental health issue, if you have commercial insurance, if you have Medicaid, now if you're uninsured, you have access to mental health treatment. We partner with about 15 community mental health centers across the state to offer the Behavioral Health Safety Net. This is a key service of our department and one that was newly created in FY21. Next slide is about crisis services. The Commissioner, I do a lot of work with other states, and Tennessee is often the envy of other states as it relates to our crisis continuum. We have youth mobile crisis services in every county here in Tennessee. As the Commissioner referenced, we'll have 3 crisis stabilization units that are opening here in the state, one already in existence there in Knoxville, operated by the McNabb Center. This is an important diversion for young people who may typically present to the emergency department with a psychiatric issue. This is an option for them to go to in lieu of a much better option.
So now we get to hear from Assistant Commissioner Paisley. We're really, really excited to work in partnership with them. Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. I am Lori Paisley, Assistant Commissioner of Coordinated School Health Division at the Department of Education. And Coordinated School Health, just a little bit about that in case you don't know, is where we support students' health and their capacity to learn through the partnership of schools, families, and communities working together. So mental health and supporting students' mental health is one of the 8 components of Coordinated School Health. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to touch on some projects and some work that we do in this area in our schools. The first is Project Aware, and that is grant funding that we work very closely with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. It is funding to provide mental health supports for our students statewide to boost mental and behavioral support for those students. It provides training for school personnel to detect and respond to mental health needs and to provide students and families additional services and supports when needed. And the focus of Project Aware is to build state and local collaborative infrastructure to plan and implement mental health partnerships between schools and communities, much like my colleagues here have shared. And the goal is increasing, like Deputy Commissioner Yancey just said, that mental health awareness, but also while promoting positive school climates through the implementation of school policies, evidence-based programs, and mental health interventions. Also, one more that I'd like to touch on is Project RAISE. That's rural access to interventions in school environments. And the goal of that program is to recruit and retain additional mental health professionals in 40 of our rural Tennessee school districts. And that grant supports stipends, training, and more for school counseling, school psychology, and school social work interns. Those rural Tennessee districts will offer stipends up to $40,000 for a 2-year commitment in our Tennessee schools for that internship. And the last one I want to touch on is our Stronger Connections grant. That's a component of the bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was signed into law in June of 2022. And the purpose of that is to establish safer and healthier learning environments and to prevent and respond to acts in schools that may impact our students, some of which have been already brought up, but bullying is one, violence and fighting that's been covered earlier that we sometimes unfortunately see in our schools. The Stronger Connections grant, after a robust grant competition, 17 high-need school districts across the state were awarded a little over $18.6 million in Stronger Connections grant funding, and that grant funding can be used in 4 focus areas. One is mental health and social personal competency supports for students, mental health and social personal competencies professional development for educators, but school staff such as SROs, administrators, and other supporting staff across our schools. And then also parent and family engagement. That can be training and resources for families focused on mental health, and also improving school climate and culture. But for me, I would be remiss, and I promise you, Commissioner Williams and I did not plan this, but that video that she just shared really inspired me. But you heard school counselors mentioned. I'm a huge advocate and fan of the work that our school counselors do. And you heard in that video, the school counselor was the school staff working with that student and her mom that referred her to the mental health professional, and all the successes that came out of that. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention the strong work that our school counselors and school social workers do across our state. And I'm very appreciative for them and the work they do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And members, I know we are down to the wire. So I think with our schedule not as heavy as some of the other committees that since you're close by, we would probably love to have you come back. And thank you for sending the materials. So members, you should have those materials in your email. And I just can't thank you enough. And I wish we had a little bit more time so you didn't have to rush, because I know there's probably lots of questions. So don't forget your questions, members, and we will work on getting the answers to you. But just God bless you.
Great.
God bless you. And thank you. It's so important we're not working in silos. We are working together. And
Right.
and I love seeing that and hearing that. So to everyone that was here today, God bless you and the work you're doing. And we look forward to working with you in the future. But thank
Absolutely.
you for being
Thank you
here.
for the opportunity.
Thank you. We're back in session. I had a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned till next week. Thank you.